Hello everyone. Welcome back. It's been a while. I was trying really hard to power through. I guess it's been almost 2 weeks now. It doesn't feel like it's been that long. But I was trying really, really hard to power through and I just hit a wall and I had to rest. I had to take a break. Um, so I did. And then today I was praying and reading my Bible and I felt like God was like, you need to get back in there and you need to go back. And pick up where we left off, which is the book of Ruth. I will give a quick synopsis, hopefully this time. You could tell, I think I could tell. I don't know if anyone else could tell. I'm sure other people could, if anyone's listening, that I was getting more and more tired because my synopsises were just like getting longer and longer and longer. Typically, when I start to get really tired, some people talk less, I talk more. So I was talking a lot more. But that being said, we're going to pick up today in the book of Ruth. My apologies for the camera. It's very Christmassy. Everything's very Starburst like because I don't know my HD camera just decided it wasn't wanting to work today. In fact, nothing was wanting to work today. None of the applications were. So I don't know what's going on with Lenny. And we almost went back to Dino Dell. Maybe I'll do that tomorrow. But today I was just um, kind of determined to get this done. So the book of Ruth is where we left off. We finished the book of Judges just prior to this. So as quick recap, we had Genesis. We had the creation of man and woman in the garden, and man and woman rebelled against God and chose to do pretty much the one thing God said you shouldn't do. They could have done anything in the world. God said, don't do this one thing. And she did the one thing and invited her husband to join her. He acquiesced. And the rest, as they say, is history. Through them came the curse of death. And upon them came the curse of death. They birthed two children initially, two boys, Cain and Abel. Cain, of course, is thought to be probably, this is my hypothesis. I had no scriptural basis for this, but my hypothesis is that I do have scriptural basis for this, but no scriptural proof that Cain was probably what the one that they were thinking that redemption would come through. And Cain ended up killing his brother Abel. And so then we had the second major sin, murder. And on it goes until there, out of the third son, arises a family in Genesis, a family from a man named Abraham, passes through the lineage of Abraham to Isaac and then to a man named Jacob, who God gives, he changes his name from Jacob. Jacob means basically deceiver. I think deceiver is kind of an interpretation of it. Supplanter is the word my Bible uses. But he is a bit deceptive in his life, and then he has a meeting with the Lord, and God changes his heart. He begins to walk with the Lord, and then ultimately changes his name to Israel. Israel, the man, has 12 sons and one daughter that we know of. And these 12 sons it's prophesied even back to Abraham's day, their I guess their great grandfather's day, that the descendants of these sons will be enslaved. They don't know how, they don't know when, but it becomes a little bit more obvious whenever the brothers decide to get rid of one of their brothers they don't like, a guy named Joseph. They throw him in a well, and they decide, hey, we won't make any money off of that. So instead, they sell him as a slave to his cousins, distant cousins, the Midianites, i.e., the Ishmaelites, who are the descendants of one of Abraham's other sons, Ishmael. The Ishmaelites, the Midianites, take him to Egypt and they sell him there into further slavery. And then ultimately, through a series of dreams, prophetic dreams that Joseph interprets, he rises to become the second in command in Egypt. Probably, as best as I understand, it was the predominant nation in the world at that time, and saves not only the Egyptians but also his family from starvation during a terrible famine. Fast forward 400 years, they're in slavery. They're enslaved. The family becomes enslaved over time, and is brought out of slavery by many miracles that God performs through a man whose name is Moses. He brings them out of slavery. They go from being a family into being now at this point they're a nation. There are very many people in this nation, and God has brought them out of slavery with the intent that they're going to go back into the land that God prophesied would be long to and be inherited by them from their predecessor Abraham. They're brought back into this land with the purpose and intent of judging the nations that are in this land. There are 7 nations that God intends for them to judge and to test them by. These nations are descended from, I won't go into all that, but these nations basically, they've done pretty much everything under the book that you can do wickedly. God has really drawn the line in my interpretation of the events whenever they begin to sacrifice their children to this demonic deity, which is not a deity, called Molech, I believe his name is. And and when that happens, God brings in the Israelites to judge them, not because the Israelites are more righteous, but because they have faith in God. So, sorry again for the lighting. It is what it is. So that's that. So they've been brought in. They've been given a covenant with God to be God's people. This is going to be a theocracy, and that God is their executive branch. He is their lawgiver, executive and legislator, lawgiver. And then they have their own judges that are going to judge. God has set up a system of judges throughout the nation that are going to discern between disputes between the Israelites. And we have already seen that in the book of Judges. What's really interesting me about the book of Judges that we just finished was that I think of these judges, and we hear of these judges in these Mosaic books as being people who discern Moses and both the people that he set up underneath him as judges as being people who would discern between disputes of the Israelites themselves. But in the book of Judges, what I really see is that God is really using these judges to judge the nations and to drive out these nations around them. So we have judgment within the house of God, and then we have judgment to the surrounding nations. And that's what's been going on in the book of Judges. Now, also in the book of Judges, which we finished at the last time I was here, is that we see that these judges are very flawed human beings. I'll try to turn this off, see if the lighting's better. They do not, they oftentimes are not living particularly righteous lives themselves, but God has chosen them, and God uses them to judge people that are, we've already read about, that are doing very, very heinous things. So, um, then we get kind of I thought this was so interesting the last time I read this through. We get to the last part, I think it's Judges 19, where we see that things are progressively off the rails and more so off the rails. At Judges 19, we have a Levite, one of the priesthood. We have a priest, first of all, who's a priest, who becomes a priest for hire, and they make a little idol, and he gets hired to go in this guy's house and be a priest for hire. So that's not good. Definitely not what God was calling these priests to be. And then we have in Judges 19, we see that there is a young priest who is traveling. He marries a concubine. He takes this concubine as he's taking her back to his home. He comes to a place where there's not much of a place to spend the night. They're going to spend the night in the open square, and he gets invited into this man's home to spend the night with them in safety. The people of the town. These are Benjamites. They're in a place called Gibeon, which is actually, I didn't realize until last time I read the Bible through, like this Gibeon becomes a really essential, like important place in the Bible. And there's many, many connections with Gibeon. But Gibeon, the men of Gibeon come to the door, and they basically, we see kind of a repeat of Sodom and Gomorrah, that they come to the door and they're banging on the door and they're like, bring the foreign man out so we can have our way with him. And um, of course, the man who's brought him into status for protection says no, and he offers them basically the women of the house, and the Levite, who's this priest, he's supposed to be the holiest, most consecrated person, one of the families in the whole country, gives them his wife essentially, and they brutally abuse her to the point where she's killed. This this is kind of um not quite the end cap of that book, but it's close to it, and it brings about the rest of Israel realizing that they need to come together. They need to do something to stop this wickedness that's infiltrated their land and is now saturated this particular area of their land. And they bring judgment upon that particular tribe. I think this is really interesting because that's close to the end of wrapping up the book of Judges, and then we move into this book of Ruth. So I think this is interesting because we have a contrast here between the Levite who is not doing right and the men of this area of the tribe of Benjamin, this area of Gibeon, not doing right by, to put it minorly, the women of the land, the women of their land that are, presumably this woman is an Israelite. And now we come to the book of Ruth, which is going to be, I think, a pretty direct contrast to all of that. And I'm not going to go any further into that, but I'll pray and then I'll get started. I'm just going to read the book of Ruth tonight. I had greater ambitions, but with all of the trouble with the camera and everything, we'll just read the book of Ruth and leave it in the Lord's hands. So, Heavenly Father, thank you for this time to read your word. I ask, Jesus, that you would use this time, Lord, to sanctify our hearts, God, to consecrate our hearts, God, to set our hearts aside, Father, for your will and for your purposes. I pray, Jesus, that as I read your word, you would open the eyes of our hearts and our minds to understand the things that you've put down, Lord, for our sakes and for our benefits. And I pray, Father, that you would convict our hearts, Lord. You would encourage our hearts, Lord. You would draw us nearer to you. Ask us in your holy name. Amen. Okay, here we go. The book of Ruth. Now it came to pass in the days when the judges ruled that there was a famine in the land. And a certain man of Bethlehem, Judah, went to dwell in the country of Moab, he and his wife and his 2 sons. The name of the man was Elimelech, and the name of his wife was Naomi, and the names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion, Ephrathites of Bethlehem, Judah. And they went to the country of Moab and remained there. Then Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left, and her 2 sons. Now they took wives of the women of Moab. The name of the one was Orpah, and the name of the other Ruth. And they dwelt there about 10 years. Then both Mahlon and Chilion also died. So the woman survived her 2 sons and her husband. Then she arose with her daughters-in-law that she might return from the country of Moab. For she had heard in the country of Moab that the Lord had visited his people by giving them bread. Therefore she went out from the place where she was, and her 2 daughter-in-laws with her, and they went on the way to return to the land of Judah. And Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, Go return each to your mother's house. The Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant that you may find rest, each in the house of her husband. So she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. And they said to her, Surely we will return with you to your people. But Naomi said, Turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Are there still sons in my womb, that they may be your husbands? Turn back, my daughters, go. For I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, if I should have a husband tonight and should also bear sons, would you wait for them till they were grown? Would you restrain yourselves from having husbands? No, my daughters, for it grieves me very much for your sakes that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me. Then they lifted up their voices and wept again. And Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. And she said, Look, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law. But Ruth said, Entreat me not to leave you, or to turn back from following after you. For wherever you go, I will go, and wherever you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God my God. Where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. The Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts you and me. When she saw that she was determined to go with her, she stopped speaking to her. Now the two of them went until they came to Bethlehem. And it happened, when they had come to Bethlehem, that all the city was excited because of them. And the women said, Is this Naomi? But she said to them, Do not call me Naomi. Call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went out full, and the Lord has brought me home again empty. Why do you call me Naomi, since the Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty has afflicted me? So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabitess, her daughter-in-law, with her, who returned from the country of Moab. Now they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. There was a relative of Naomi's husband, a man of great wealth, of the family of Elimelech. His name was Boaz. So Ruth the Moabitess said to Naomi, Please let me go to the field and glean heads of grain after him in whose sight I may find favor. And she said to her, Go, my daughter. Then she left and went and gleaned in the field after the reapers. And she happened to come to the part of the field belonging to Boaz, who was of the family of Elimelech. Now behold, Boaz came from Bethlehem, and said to the reapers, The Lord be with you. And they answered him, The Lord bless you. Then Boaz said to his servant who was in charge of the reapers, Whose young woman is this? So the servant who was in charge of the reapers answered and said, It is the young Moabite woman who came back with Naomi from the country of Moab. And she said, Please let me glean and gather after the reapers among the sheaves. So she came and has continued from morning until now, though she rested a little in the house. Then Boaz said to Ruth, You will listen, my daughter, will you not? Do not go down to glean in another field, nor go from here, but stay close by my young women. Let your eyes be on the field which they reap, and go after them. Have I not commanded the young man not to touch you? And when you are thirsty, go to the vessels and drink from what the young men have drawn. So she fell on her face, bowed down to the ground, and said to him, Why have I found favor in your eyes, that you should take notice of me, since I'm a foreigner? And Boaz answered and said to her, It has been fully reported to me all that you have done for your mother-in-law since the death of your husband, and how you have left your father and your mother in the land of your birth, and have come to a people whom you did not know before. The Lord repay your work, and a full reward be given to you by the Lord God of Israel, under whose wings you have come for refuge. Then she said, Let me find favor in your sight, my lord, for you have comforted me, and have spoken kindly to your maidservant, though I am not like one of your maidservants. Now Boaz said to her at mealtime, Come here and eat of the bread, and dip your piece of bread in the vinegar. So she sat beside the reapers, and he passed parched grain to her, and she ate and was satisfied, and kept some back. And when she rose up to glean, Boaz commanded his young men, saying, Let her glean even among the sheaves, and do not reproach her. Also let grain from the bundles fall purposely for her. Leave it that she may glean, and do not rebuke her. So she gleaned in the field until evening, and beat out what she had gleaned, and it was about an ephah of barley. Then she took it up and went into the city. And her mother-in-law saw what she had gleaned, so she brought out and gave to her what she had kept back from what she had after she had been satisfied. And her mother-in-law said to her, Where have you gleaned today? And where did you work? Blessed be the one who took notice of you. So she told her mother-in-law with whom she had worked, and said, The man's name with whom I worked today is Boaz. Then Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, Blessed be he of the Lord, who has not forsaken his kindness to the living and the dead. And Naomi said to her, This man is a relation of ours, one of our close relatives. Ruth the Moabitess said, He also said to me, "You shall stay close by my young men until they have finished all my harvest." And Naomi said to Ruth, her daughter in law, "It is good, my daughter, that you go out with these young women, and that people do not meet you in any other field." So she stayed close by the young women of Boaz to glean until the end of the barley harvest and wheat harvest, and she dwelt with her mother in law. Then Naomi, her mother in law, said to her, "My daughter, shall I not seek security for you, that it may be well with you? Now Boaz, whose young woman you were with, is he not our relative? In fact, he is winnowing barley tonight at the threshing floor. Therefore, wash yourself and anoint yourself, and put on your best garment, and go down to the threshing floor. But do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. Then it shall be, when he lies down, you shall take notice of the place where he lies. You shall go in, uncover his feet, and lie down, and he will tell you what you should do." And she said to her, "All that you say to me, I will do." So she went down to the threshing floor, and did according to all that her mother-in-law instructed her. And after Boaz had eaten and drunk, and his heart was cheerful, she went to lie down at the end of the heap of grain. And she came softly, and covered his feet, and lay down. Now it happened at midnight that the man was startled, and he turned himself, and there a woman was lying at his feet. And he said to her, "Who are you?" So she answered, "I am Ruth, your maidservant. Take your maidservant under your wing, for you are a close relative." Then he said, "Blessed are you of the Lord, my daughter, for you have shown more kindness at the end than at the beginning, and that you did not go after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do all that you request. For all the people of my town know that you are a virtuous woman. Now it is true that I am a close relative. However, there is a relative closer than I. Stay this night, and in the morning it shall be that if he will perform the duty of a close relative for you, good, let him do it. But if he does not want to perform the duty for you, then I will perform the duty for you, as the Lord lives. Lie down until morning." So she lay at his feet until morning, and she arose before one could recognize another. Then he said, "Do not let it be known that the woman came to the threshing floor." Also, he said, "Bring the shawl that is on you and hold it." So when she held it, he measured 6 ephahs of barley and laid it on her. Then she went into the city. When she came to her mother in law, she said, "Is that you, my daughter?" Then she told her all that the man had done for her. And she said, "These 6 ephahs of barley he gave me, for he said to me, 'Do not go empty handed to your mother in law.'" Then she said, "Sit still, my daughter, until you know how the matter will turn out, for the man will not rest until he has concluded the matter this day." Now Boaz went up to the gate and sat down there. And behold, the close relative of whom Boaz had spoken came by. So Boaz said, "Come aside, friend, sit down here." So he came aside and sat down. And he took 10 men of the elders of the city and said, "Sit down here." So they sat down. Then he said to the close relative, "Naomi, who has come back from the country of Moab, sold the piece of land which belonged to our brother Elimelech. And I thought to inform you by saying, 'Buy it back in the presence of the inhabitants and the elders of my people.' If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not redeem it, then tell me, that I may know. For there is no one but you to redeem it, and I am next after you." And he said, "I will redeem it." Then Boaz said, "On the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you must also buy it from Ruth the Moabitess, the wife of the dead, to perpetuate the name of the dead through his inheritance." And the close relative said, "I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I ruin my own inheritance. You redeem my right of redemption for yourself, for I cannot redeem it." Now this was the custom in former times in Israel concerning redeeming and exchanging, to confirm anything. One man took off his sandal and gave it to the other, and this was a confirmation in Israel. Therefore the close relative said to Boaz, "Buy it for yourself." So he took off his sandal. And Boaz said to the elders and all the people, "You are witnesses this day that I have bought all that was Elimelech's, all that was Chilion's and Mahlon's, from the hand of Naomi. Moreover, Ruth the Moabitess, the widow of Mahlon, I have acquired as my wife, to perpetuate the name of the dead through his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among his brethren, and from his position at the gate. You are witnesses this day." And all the people who were at the gate and the elders said, "We are witnesses. The Lord make the woman who is coming to your house like Rachel and Leah, the two who built the house of Israel, and may you prosper in Ephrath and be famous in Bethlehem. May your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring which the Lord will give you from this woman." So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. And when he went into her, the Lord gave her conception, and she bore a son. Then the women said to Naomi, "Blessed be the Lord, who has not left you this day without a close relative. And may his name be famous in Israel. And may he be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter in law who loves you is better to you than 7 sons who has borne him." Then Naomi took the child and laid him on her bosom and became a nurse to him. Also, the neighbor women gave him a name, saying, "There is a son born to Naomi," and they called his name Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of David. Now, this is the genealogy of Perez. Perez begot Hezron. Hezron begot Ram. Ram begot Abinadab. Abinadab begot Nahshon. Nahshon begot Salmon. Salmon begot Boaz. Boaz begot Obed. Obed begot Jesse. And Jesse begot David. And it's a very short night tonight. We'll leave it right there at the end of Ruth to start on 1 Samuel. So, another story. I don't know why the story of Ruth is not actually in the book of Judges. Good question for me to find out. But it is set during the time of the Judges. There's a lot of interesting stuff. I don't have the notes in this Bible. It's in my other Bible. I need to copy it over. But the names in the story have a lot of deep and rich meaning. If you have time, I really encourage you, go look up the names of each person in this story. It was really very illuminating for me the last time I did so. There's a lot of deep and rich meaning. The names in themselves tell a story. So I encourage you to do that. Of course, Ruth she's a Moabitess, so that means she's a descendant not of Abraham, but of Abraham's nephew Lot and his 2 daughters. I don't know which one, but that's her ancestry. So she's not an Israelite, but we see here that she is brought into the family um, of Israel through um, through Boaz, and then ultimately, this is very timely to read Ruth today for Christmas because you may have heard in the story the mention that the story centers around the little town of Bethlehem, and um, Ruth is going to be mentioned again, I believe, in the genealogy of Matthew as the great, however many times grandmother of Joseph, who is Jesus's um, earthly father. Why? How does that even work? I think today we would not really, in America, we don't really consider that to be um, as pertinent as they did then. At that time, I mentioned this before last time I went through this, but I think it bears repeating that there's a really great podcast if you just like podcasts. It's called The History of Rome, and they go through. He does a great job going through all of these different emperors. One of the things that was really important in succession was having a son. But a lot of these emperors in the Roman Empire, they were just too busy to have a son, and or uh, their children were often in peril. There was a lot of palace intrigue, and so children oftentimes finding the right son that lived to maturity to replace an emperor was difficult. So it seems to me from listening to this podcast that it was quite common for emperors to adopt a son. Oftentimes they were even adopting like 60-year-old grown men. But once the adoption was complete, that man had full rights, just as though he was a biological son. And this was often done for succession. So I think it's interesting. The Gospel of Luke, many people say that this is actually Mary's genealogy. So that Jesus was technically descended biologically from David, but then also that his earthly father um, would have adopted him with the full rights of sonship, giving him both the biological maternal qualification for being a son of David, but also the legal, which was full legal standing at that time, from my understanding, paternal adoption to inherit the literal throne of David. Interesting stuff. Anyways, so the book of Ruth, very timely for Christmas season. And I love that she's not an Israelite, but she is welcomed into the lineage of David and ultimately Jesus Christ by her faith, not by her righteousness inherently, but by her faith in God. So that's all I have for tonight. Short night ish, 30 minutes. I hope y'all have a great night and see you next time. Bye bye.